going. So welcome everybody to our Zone 33 masterclass. Tonight, we're going to be covering the art of capturing Rotary in action. So all of us are people of action and we do these Rotary things to do good in the world. And we have two exceptional photographers and storytellers with us tonight. Allison Henson and Brooke Ward are exceptional shots and have very interesting careers. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them here briefly. So Brooke Ward has worked mostly in the healthcare industry for most of his professional life, but his passion goes to photography. And he learned to shoot with his dad, who was a professional photographer, as a son. His son now shoots with him. So that's pretty cool. Over the last 15 years, he's focused his photography on landscapes, architecture, travel, urbex, drone photography, underwater, and sports. That's a little bit of an understatement. This guy shoots some way cooler stuff, and he's being very humble. He has covered the NFL, the Steelers, who he's not a fan of, but he'll shoot them over the last 11 seasons for media. He does some Formula 1 racing in Austin, Texas, pretty cool, in Miami, and he plans to cover the NFL Formula 1 again. Brooke also works on two documentaries as a director, photographer, drone pilot, and a series called Shutter Rush, which is available on Amazon Prime. Brooke, I didn't know that, right, Brooke? I'm excited about that. What I will personally say about Brooke, I know Brooke, he's a friend of mine, and he is an exceptionally dedicated servant. He actually runs our local hospital. He kept us all safe through COVID with his team, and they were really good to all of our region. And Brooke takes a ton of photos for our local charity events and helps a lot of causes, and is a really a good civic leader and good leader in our community. And then Alice Henson, I'm just getting to know Alice through my friend Sean Patty. So Sean, thanks for hooking me up with Alice. And Alice is a visual storyteller of over 20 years. Now, Alice, for you Rotarians in the room, was the very first staff photographer of Rotary International from 2004 to 2019, believe that or not. She began her career at Rotary as the supervisor of photography and the senior photographer. She's done international projects, US-based projects. She's worked with Rotary Club members over the years, taking action photos of them in their communities, addressing the pressing issues like eradicating polio, doing clean water, maternal and child health care programs, peace, education, and all the great, wonderful areas that we work in. She's worked with some major NGO partners. So you may have heard of these folks. Foundation, I don't know, helping us end polio, the WHO, or the World Health Organization, little organization called UNICEF, Habitat for Humanity, Shelter Box, just to name a few. So she's helped tons of areas and done some pretty crazy stuff, and we are very fortunate to have her. She actually did the shots for the End Polio Now campaign. So all the End Polio Now that we see, she's done that, as well as interviewing folks like Dr. Jane Goodall, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We do a project with Rotary with his daughter, Ted Turner, and all that for World Polio Day in 2019. Her and Hamilton were just reminiscing over some of the international conventions she's been to, and she enjoys connecting with these Rotarians that she's met throughout the years. Let me see here. So
Polio Now pictures. She used to be a staff photographer for Rotary, and he's done.
And I'm getting another bio. That's good. So, and let's see here. Alice also enjoys, she's a digital media specialist for Rush University Health System now. So that's where she's at currently, and working on community engagement. So her and Brooke are working in this health arena. So we're good to get these folks together to help save us even more. We know we need it. If you want to learn about these folks, we do have their links and their bios and their portfolios. But without any further ado, if everybody could help me with a big Rotary welcome for Alice and Brooke. Thank you. Thank you. So folks, we want to get going here. We're 9 minutes in and we're wasting time, precious time with you guys. So starting out, let's go ladies first. Alice, what are your best tips for beginning photographers? So somebody maybe even just picked up this thing. I don't know. I think these have cameras in them now, I was told. But like, if you're just starting out trying to take a better photograph, what are the things you're looking at?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me, Joe, and thank you for the great introduction. And I'm excited to be in the company of Brooke as well and learn more about his work. But As far as best tips for beginner photographers, by you just holding up your cell phone just reminded me that the phone that you have, or the camera that you have, is the best one, because that's the one that you have available to take pictures with. So don't be intimidated by gear. There's actually a very famous quote by a photographer that I'm blanking on right now, and Brooke may know who I'm speaking of. But it might be Henry Cartier-Bresson said something like that, or maybe Robert Capa, but the best camera that you have is the one that you have on you. So don't be intimidated by spending thousands of dollars or having the right gear. But really, to me, take pictures of what you enjoy and practice often taking photos. And if you photograph people, just be kind and grateful towards the people you are photographing. Seek out good light, good available light. Avoid photographing in mid-daylight. That's really harsh daylight to be photographing in. When you're in that situation, if you can be an open shade. And I'm saying these particular tips because I think that since we are mostly dealing with Rotarians, I know the situations that you're in on projects. So you could be doing an event in the middle of the day, but if it's in a park and there's some nice trees, maybe you can, have people gather under there to, put together the supplies that they're donating or giving out or things like that. So if you have any options in the planning process, then think about where you're going to set up for good light. And what else? And be very thoughtful about your composition. The subject doesn't always need to be in the center of the frame, and don't be afraid to move closer to your subjects or the action that you're photographing. There's a million more tips, so I'm gonna pass it over to Brooke because he probably has some that I'm leaving out.
Thanks, Alice. And like Alice, I want to thank Joe and all of you for having the two of us on. It's my honor to be with you tonight. Hopefully I share something that's worthwhile for you tonight. So I think, the first bullet point I had on my list is maybe one similar to what Alice said. And that is, don't focus on getting a better camera. I'm always shocked at how many people who want to get into photography, are learning photography, or want to do more of it, and they think better, newer gear is the answer. And so it's interesting that Alice started with that quote, the best camera is the one you have with you. And I always tell people, focus on learning what you have, because chances are you're going to get great photos with that gear. You don't need, new expensive gear. And I actually, early 2020, bought a new camera setup, but prior to that, it had been 12 years since I bought any camera gear, because I try to avoid that trap myself as someone who does a lot of it. So I think that it's just focus on that. I think one of the other tips and tricks I always tell people is, before you have to go out and as Rotarians go into events, go elsewhere, go to the local parade, go to, school event, go to your family events and take pictures there. I mean, that's the time to practice, right? Instead of waiting until you get to an event where it's important you capture the photo you need for a Rotary or a Rotary event. I think going to local camera clubs is great. I'm always surprised at how many people don't realize they exist. I think in the 30 miles around where I am, there's 5 of them. And so you can always Google and find a local camera club. They're usually very cheap. I think the local one here is $15 a year to be a member. They have two meetings a month. They have guest lectures. They have technical skill training, and you get to learn and meet a lot of good people. And then I always tell people, just get out and shoot. And so sort of tying it back to that camera club, or anybody else, frankly, you can find, you're going to meet people that you gravitate to, people who like to take the same type of photos, and then make plans to go out and shoot with them. Photography, I always find, is more enjoyable to do it with people. usually other photographers. Now there's a time and a place where I want to be out in a mountain by myself, waiting for the perfect, sunrise or whatever. But generally it's better with people. And I think if you make plans, like Joe and I have done this, we've gone for a photo walk. It's always more enjoyable. You get to share stories, learn from each other, ask techniques. Why did you shoot it that way? And it forces you to sort of get off the couch and go do those things. And then I always tell people, you can do things like, looking things up on the internet. And I'm always shocked at how much I can learn just, going to YouTube and typing in cell phone photography or whatever. You can learn tips and tricks. And lastly, I always tell people, have fun with it. You're more likely to improve your skill around anything if you enjoy it. And so hopefully if you're listening to us today and you're here to hear this topic, you're interested in it. I think that would make some sense for you.
Well, I'll say, Brooke, I learned more than I'm sure you did shooting with you, but I do appreciate you taking time with to mentor shooters like myself and photographers like myself. But those are awesome tips, you guys. Like those, you really summarized a lot there. So you've started taking more photos, you filled up your phone with pictures, you maybe bought your first system, and you're maybe even have an extra lens or two that you're carrying around, and you're trying to shoot more events proactively, carrying your camera around. Once you've kind of got into that, what are the next steps to level up, or how do you guys see that progress as a creative? Maybe we'll go back to Brooke for this one.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm sure Alice is going to finish up strong here. And a couple of things I had here is I always like the idea of humble inquiry. And so again, connecting it back to doing this with people, the local camera club, there's lots of online clubs and stuff. And just, as I said earlier, you're going to gravitate to people who do and like the same type of photography. And so if you ask for help, if you seek help, if you ask questions, if you do research, people are likely almost always to help you. The rare exception to that, is true, but usually they do. And I could tell you a story later if you want about trying to get help on the side of an NFL game. But generally, people want to help. And so if you go with humble, approach, that's going to work. The other thing I always tell people is be kind to yourself, experiment, try things. And so one of the things I like to do when I'm looking on the internet or looking at photos or looking at other people's work, if I see an image that I like, either a location, a technique, a style, I'll often do a screen capture of that. And then I have a database that I've created of locations or styles. And so occasionally when I'm going on a photo walk, I'll go through that and I'll say, oh, I saw this photo a year ago from Alice where she did this light panning or something. I've never done it before. I'm going to try it. And most likely I'm not going to get it right the first time, but that's part of the learning process, is trying to sort of replicate that work, learn from other people's style, those kind of things. The other thing I like to do is create a plan and goals. So if I'm going on a specific photography trip, if I'm going to an event, usually I try and get a hold of the event organizer ahead of time and find out what exactly are they looking for. Or in my case, when I'm going to an NFL game or a Formula One, I'm talking to the sports editor in advance. What is the likely story or the player they want to cover? So I can go into that with a game plan about making sure, okay, they're going to do a feature story on this tight end. I need to make sure I get that individual covered, from a number of different angles for the story. But during the event, stories produce themselves, right? And so maybe there's a massive fumble at the end, the other team gets it and scores. You need to try and be flexible. And so trying to have a plan and work ahead, I think makes some sense. But I think those are, some basic things, and I'll punt to Alice here to add to it.
Yeah, I think that we think very similar, Brooke. You touched upon many things that I was going to say as well. But, I think these days you can really learn anything from YouTube if you just put in whatever that is that you want to learn. Like right now, over the last year, I've been learning how to edit video. So when I need to know how to do something specific, I look that up. You just type in a few words of what you need and it's there. But I also believe, like in my photography, I really believe in like the human connection and human interaction and mentoring. So, even though I've been a photographer for over 20 years, I still have mentors, whether it's learning about how to price something, how to do a new technique, learning about video editing. That's all really important to me. So, and also all the subscriptions that are out there, the platforms like LinkedIn Learning, lynda.com, Creative Live, they're all really great. Even Masterclass has some photography stuff, but that's like more broad in a lot of different genres of topics. And like the Camera Club, I would say join a local photo organization to network. Depending on how big of a city you're in, there's APA photography, there's ASMP. Learning from other photographers, learning from your peers is really great. Workshops like Santa Fe workshops or Main Media has a wealth of topics of for photography that you could go immerse yourself for a week. And I'm gonna save touching upon like the storytelling until we get a little bit further along, but I also have similar thoughts about like preparing for your assignment and what you were talking about. So
Okay.
I'll leave it there for now.
No, and I think that's a perfect transition, and we're here to learn how to tell stories. One of the things that we felt as a team is that we wanted to let these folks have some space to tell some stories, because I tell you, once you see the photos that come with these stories, you're going to want to hear them as well. So Alice, I'm going to see, we're going to try for her to screen share, and Alice is going to start us out with some of the story, start out with a story or two that she chose to help tell us a little bit about her shooting, and as well some lessons for us about that. So let's see if we can figure that out. Or do I have to ask you to share?
Yeah. So the way we're going to do this is Brooke and I are going to go a little bit back and forth. I'm going to share a few images and then he'll share some. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to share my screen here. And if anyone has a problem seeing my screen, let me know. Okay, it does give me a signal that you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, you're good. Okay,
great. So hold on one second here. Oh, that's going to take a little bit longer than I expected. So this first image is one of the very first images that I took for Rotary. Sorry, I thought this was queued up already. Oops. Hold on. Okay. So do you see the image full screen with just a black background? Because I can't see you guys anymore.
We do. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay. So this was my very first assignment for Rotary, and I was in northern Thailand, and this is an Aka Hill tribe woman. And not only is this photo important to me because it was like the first time I traveled internationally, besides like the Caribbean on vacations, I was like, oh my God, I've arrived. I'm an international travel photographer. And so this was at midday, the hardest time of the day to shoot. But this woman was walking through the desolate village because everyone was out in the fields working, pretty much out in the fields working. And I was struck by her coming through the village in this full traditional regalia, and my crew wasn't close to me and I had no way to communicate with her, but she saw that I had a camera and I just kind of gestured, but talked to her. I just talked normal. You know, you don't want to, even if you don't speak the same language, you don't need to start to talk louder or be over animated. But I kind of gestured for her to stand in this one spot in the shade because their homes were elevated and had these overhangs on the underneath part, and I had her stand in the shade just on the edge of where the sunlight was hitting. So the light sort of just bounces back up into her face and creates a nice reflection. So I have used that technique to photograph people over and over again. And I actually learned that as a wedding photographer, taking a wedding workshop at Santa Fe Workshop before I was doing photography for Rotary International. This was in Haiti. This was a year after the earthquake. And this was definitely a challenging assignment overall. And this was a very challenging moment and probably one of the biggest risks I ever took as a photographer. Even the security team that I was working with did not want to go up in the crumbling cathedral of Port-au-Prince to protect us. So me and the producer and this young man who was, it was crazy. He had the keys to the bell tower, obviously didn't need them, but he still felt obligated to attend to the church in some sort of way. And he wanted to show us this view. And when we got up there, and he wanted to show me the bell that was still intact but cracked, and it was over to the right. But I was more fascinated by photographing him. You know, I didn't think that the photo was as interesting without a person in there. It was just a devastation shot. And then the way the rebar sort of framed behind him was very fascinating to me. And I did use flash on this because, again, it was during the hardest time of the day to photograph. So sometimes you don't have a choice and you have to figure out how to make a good photo.
Alice?
Yes.
Alice, could you tell us a little bit on that one, why you did sort of a third of him? Yeah, he's in 1/3 and sort of the rest of the picture is the 2/3, why you decided that rather than framing him in the middle? Just sort of the idea of why you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I rarely frame people in the center. It would have to be because framing them symmetrically just makes it a much more impactful image, and maybe that symmetry is adding to it. But if he was right in the center, you wouldn't see from this upper level of the church, you wouldn't be able to see the devastation. You wouldn't be able to see the rows of columns. He wouldn't be framed as interestingly without being off to the side and having that rebar come across behind him. So to me, this is like a true environmental photo. You know, you have a person in a location and it's telling a story with the image.
Alice, do you mind if I add something here too as well?
Yeah.
So usually in photography, you'll hear about the rule of thirds, and I thought Alice was going to mention it as she was talking, and she was without mentioning it. And usually they say the rule of thirds, you know, you want your subjects to be on the far right or the far left third of the image because it makes the image more appealing. Exactly what she was describing. And that's true pretty much of anything in photography. Now, that being said, every photography rule can be broken, you know, so it's sort of an interesting concept, but this is very common. And I think Alice has mastered that rule of thirds.
Well, and this, thank you so much. This particular image definitely gives you, like, if we had those grid lines, he falls in the upper quadrant of the rule of thirds. Like his face is right on that edge. I'm not going to talk as much through the next few, but this was also in Haiti. This, this was just a general stock shot and giving a sense of place to the story of what we're covering in general. But I was there covering projects. And one of the projects was a water project at a school that was being rebuilt. And these kids got this amazing communal water hand washing station and drinking water station. And this is just one of the kids on recess that was coming to the water fountain. And maybe I'll just stop there.
You guys can go back and forth however you'd like. I appreciate it. So yeah, Brooke, do you want to share a couple and then we'll go back and forth? Does that work?
Sure.
All right, let's see if we can figure out how to screen share.
Maybe.
I don't know. Alice, see if you can close yours, or
Oh.
see if you can. It's
I
okay. We're all figuring out Zoom.
It's just it's not showing me.
Yeah, where's the little toolbar at?
It's not showing me the toolbar.
Okay.
Maybe.
Now I
wait.
have it so multiple people can share. See if you can now, Brooke. And if not, I can back up
Here we
and just
go.
tell me where you want to go.
Nope, I think I got it. I had to go into my system preferences and make a switch here. My security was on. So can you see this image here of bassinets?
No,
And so I thought,
No, I don't.
no, we're still
No.
seeing
Alice, see if
Alice's.
you
Oh,
see
are
if you
you-
can stop sharing, and then it'll just see Brooks maybe.
You might need to hit escape. I don't know if you're on a Mac, so I don't
I'm
know what
on
the
a Mac. Is it gone now?
No,
You're still seeing my screen.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's okay. We'll figure it out here. No sweat. Here, I got it. There you go.
Maybe you
Hey.
can take control. There we go.
We're good now.
Good.
All right, Brooke.
all right,
Oh, I know
Are you
this
seeing-
one. I love this
are you
one,
seeing the
Brooke.
bassinets now? Okay,
Yes.
I went into the settings, by the way. The Zoom had it set up where multiple people could share, so I turned that off. So when we go back and forth now, that should avoid it. So this is actually shot in Ukraine, in Chernobyl. And I thought, sharing some photos and some stories from Ukraine would be timely based on what's going on over the last year. I had the opportunity back at the end of 19 to go to Kyiv and spend a couple of days, and then up to Chernobyl and spend 5 days with a group of photographers. My son and I went, and we were there with 18 photographers from Great Britain. And we were there to sort of photograph the decay of not only the nuclear power plant, but all of the villages and the towns around that area. One of the first stops we went to was the hospital. It was interesting. You ride a train into Chernobyl, you go through security to put you on a bus, and we took off. And they gave us this lecture around, staying on the sidewalk, not entering any buildings, not going in the woods or in the forest, all kind of stuff. And so we're heading down this little narrow paved road, and the bushes are actually touching the side of the bus as we're driving through, scraping the side of the bus. That's how narrow it was. And we get down, and the guide stops and he says, "Okay, we're here. We're going to be here for 2 hours. Everybody meet back here." And all these Brits take off through the woods, running like crazy, like mad. And my son and I stand there like, where are they going? It's like woods. And the guide had to point out that we were actually standing at the time on a 6-lane divided highway that Mother Nature had taken over. And he brought up a map, and around us was a hospital, a school, an apartment building. There was probably 50 buildings within a pretty relatively close distance, but you couldn't see them. And so, we took the map and off we went. And the first stop we went to was the hospital. And, for the most part, when that nuclear accident happened, the people evacuated within a couple of days, and they left most things behind. And we happened upon the OB nursery when we were there, and we captured this image. And it was just, my son and I had a moment here talking about, how many babies were in this when that hospital closed. at that time, and where did they go, and did they resettle in Ukraine, did they go elsewhere, and were they harmed, and all those kind of things. And it was an interesting opportunity because I grew up, I don't want to say my age, but I grew up during the Cold War, and that was a prominent thing in our history, right? My son is a millennial. He didn't have that experience. And so before arriving to Chernobyl, we were walking around Kyiv, and it just happened to be a beautiful October day, and it was actually a holiday, and they had a parade and all these kind of things. And at the end of the day, we were at a pub and we were having a drink, and I was telling my son, all day I've been creeped out a little bit. And he was like, what are you talking about? It was great. It was beautiful. And I said, I understand, but it took me all day to figure out what was wrong, or what appeared to be wrong. And we're around all these Ukrainians, and it's a holiday, and they're talking about, with each other. And it was husbands and wives and grandparents and grandkids and all that kind of stuff. And they're talking about how beautiful the day is and what kind of homework your kid has in school, and, their jobs and all the things we talk about. But their language is similar to Russian. It's not the same, but it's similar. And so, growing up in the Cold War time period, everything was good and bad during that time period, and everything bad was Russian, right? And I just had this creepy vibe all day that something bad was going to happen. Meanwhile, he has no idea, right? It's natural to him because he didn't have that. But it was one of the interesting stories that came out of that trip. We also got a chance to go to Duga, which is outside about a couple miles from the nuclear power plant. This is a giant radar tower back that it goes about 3/4 of a mile long. I actually took this with my drone about halfway up, and this was an early nuclear ballistic missile defense system for Russia, so that if the United States launched, they'd be able to detect it with this radar system that they abandoned. And the scope and the size of this it's hard to imagine. It's like going to the Grand Canyon. You can see it, and it's beautiful and big, and you can't take a picture that does it justice. And that's sort of how I felt about this radar station. This is actually inside one of the cooling towers at the nuclear power plant, looking up. And you can see the structure here, and it was a nice, beautiful blue sky that day. But I love this graffiti that someone here painted on the lower right-hand corner. And this clearly had to have happened after the accident. And I don't know if that's from a real person, a photo, or if it's just someone's imagination of what the locals were going through when the nuclear disaster happened. But I thought it was fitting for this location and this image. And then, of course, we had a chance to sort of be near in the nuclear reactor that melted down. You can see the shield on the right. This was the shield that a multinational group built over the course of 20 years and slid it in place. Because if you've seen or read anything about the story, they dropped concrete on it to try and seal it up. And over time, that was cracking and it was releasing radiation. And so the shield, and for $100 US, by the way, they would have let us go inside and explore the inside of this. And we didn't do that. Sometimes I wish I had, but I was trying to use good judgment while we're there. But we got very close, and you could sort of explore that whole thing. And oh, by the way, in the background here, in the middle of the frame, that's where you can see that cooling tower that we were standing underneath earlier. And then we found things like this, and I like to take little detailed shots. This was actually in an elementary school. There was a stack of probably 500 of these gas masks laying on the floor in various, positions in disarray and of various sizes. Some were for adults and kids and those kind of things. And again, it's just sort of capturing the moment. They were deploying these to the local citizens at the time, assuming that would help protect them from that accident, which obviously wouldn't happen. But talking to one of the guides who actually worked in Chernobyl as a police chief back in the day, they had all these because they were there to protect the citizens from a chemical attack by the United States. They were convinced that we were going to attack this region and harm them in some way. And so they didn't have these there in preparation for the nuclear disaster. They had them there because of us. And so going back to the story earlier about how good versus evil, and we always perceive them as evil. Well, they clearly perceived us as evil during that time period as well. So let me pause here, and maybe it's time to go back to Alyce as well.
Thanks, Brooke. Hey, Brooke, real quick. And I've heard the Chernobyl story before, but how long were you allowed to be in the zone? Right? It wasn't like days. I mean, you had to be in and shoot your pictures and get out. How long was that?
No, not really. We could not stay, at least when I was there, you could not stay in the zone. meaning when they evacuated that in the 1980s, of course, they evacuated everyone. And what I learned, by the way, after being there, is there's about 80 individuals who later didn't want to leave and moved back, and they've been there all along. And most of them are women. And the tour guides and stuff refer to them as babushkas. And we actually went to a couple of their houses and had dinner. So these are people who have never left, lived off the land. Everything we ate was grown and produced right there on their property. But every day there's a train that goes in. There's actually 2 trains that go in the morning and 2 leave at night, and they bring workers in. Even today, there are people that work in Chernobyl every day, manning the nuclear power plants. Even though they're shut down, they have to be maintained. And there's security and fire department, all that. So there's employees who work there every day, not to mention people like me who show up. And so we would get on the train about 6 in the morning. It would take about an hour to get there. You'd let the employees get off first because they're off to work. And then we would hop on our little bus and go off their tour guide. And we would usually catch the last train at about 7 o'clock at night and head back into the village where we were staying. And we would shower, get cleaned up, have dinner, and start over the next day. So we did that 5 days in a row.
Wow.
So we were generally in the exclusion zone there from roughly 7:30 in the morning till about 7:30 at night or so every day.
Thanks, man. What a cool story to share. All right, Alice, would you like to take the next one?
Sure. Okay. So again, I think Brooke and I are in sync about some of our content here. This was from my assignment in Ukraine in 2012, and I was doing a story on a Rotarian that ran the cardiac department at a hospital, a children's hospital in Ukraine, and was doing heart surgeries for newborns and other infants that had congenital heart disease. And this woman was with her baby in the NICU, and it was really intense because so many of the moms, their children were born with a heart disease, and the children had to be whisked away and go immediately into surgery. So they didn't get to have that typical bond except for in this very sterile environment. But the flip side of that, many of those children grew up to have very healthy hearts and get to do community races. So this is downtown Kyiv in 2012, right around Independence Square. And it just really breaks my heart to see the country these days. I have so many beautiful pictures of Kyiv during a peaceful time. And this is in Niger or Niger, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it. And the thing that I like about this scene more than anything as a photographer and giving tips to photographers is, I was photographing something else at the health clinic right in front of my face. And this was a scene that I just decided to turn around and look behind me at the well. So I was using a long lens. It was a 200 millimeter lens. And they were watching what was happening at the health clinic, and they had stopped gathering water to see what we were doing. And I just got this scene in a split second before everybody started paying attention to me or going back about their business. And as you know, as you Rotarians know, water and sanitation is one of the major areas of focus. So I have documented that a lot. And especially in Africa, young girls are in the vulnerable position to go out and get water for the family, and it can often be quite dangerous for them going out into the fields or out to rivers by themselves. And this was in India, a rainwater harvesting project that I was documenting. And I just loved the repetition of these water pots that they had all lined up and ready and waiting to fill up. And I have some photos, you'll just have to imagine it, but I have some photos of the women putting these on their heads and carrying them 5 or 6 high. And this was from another project in India for a women's weaver project. And this kind of goes back to one of the things I was saying earlier, don't be afraid to get close. This woman was working on her project that she was sewing, and there was actually a lot of women in the room, and they're all sitting on the floor. So I got on the floor too, and it was just a normal situation where people are like in a sewing circle, so to speak. And she laughed at something one of her friends said, and I was just so close to her that I was able to get this really sweet, genuine smile on her face. And looking for the light. This is part of the Weavers Project as well. And I was amazed how the light came through the window and just hit this one thread. But I love the softness of seeing the woman in the shadows. You can still see the details of her. I'll show this little section on polio, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Brooke. This is the end result. This is what we want to see happen. We want to see children get immunized. This is the classic shot. I have many, many shots like this, so I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of drop shots, but this is one of my favorites. But there's so much more around the polio story, like polio survivors. This woman is a polio survivor, and she was a seamstress as well, and her sewing studio was on the 3rd floor of the home that her and her mother lived in, and the only way that she could get up the stairs was by using her arms. So she was really truly dragging the rest of her body up. Now let's see. And then the whole cold chain story of getting the vaccine out into rural communities and places that they need to get the vaccine to. So this was at one of the labs. And then once people are out in the community, the health workers are depending on neighbors in the community to let them know where they might think there might be a group of people or families that have not had their children immunized. And then the whole mobilization, there's so many different ways that it happens. And this was in Cote d'Ivoire, and all of these bikes were donated to help health workers get out into the community to, be nimble and get out and, again, immunize or check and go door to door, but via bicycle. So I will hold it there. Let's see if I can I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. And then maybe Brooke, if you have a couple, there you go. Perfect.
Sure.
Thanks.
So I saw in the comments, I think it was John mentioned, trying to move away from sort of stopping people from what they're doing and posing. And I agree, there's a time and place for that, right? And I think Alyce just showed you a great ton of examples of how you can get candid shots of people in action that tell the story in a way that's meaningful versus having them stop and sort of pose and all those kind of things. And so I just wanted to acknowledge John's comment. The other thing I would add to what Alice said is been my experience when I've traveled the world, and I've been fortunate to be able to travel quite a bit. Generally, people, if you ask nicely if you could take their photo, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And a lot of people in a lot of countries, of course, have cell phones as well, but they don't often have the technology we do. So a lot of times their cell phones are for function, communication, not necessarily for taking photos and stuff. And so often, whether I'm taking a photo with my cell phone or with my camera, showing them the image at the end is their reward, and sort of, so keep that in mind as well. Alice showed the picture of the drop of the vaccine going into the child's mouth. Very similar technique is used for this photo, right? And so you're talking about a high shutter speed to capture that moment. She was trying to capture that, that vaccine drop before it landed in the mouth, freeze the action. Similar kind of technique is used here, except I'm trying to freeze the action of the car. And so it's just sort of interesting. Alice and I didn't plan ahead, but a lot of these photos and sort of stories go together. And, so when I'm shooting, I'm trying to, get a sense for what the sports editor, the photo editor is going to want. But sometimes the car is the focus, but it's not. Just like Alice had the picture of the ladies with the water and she had the silver water buckets in front. It's interesting, right? Because the ladies at the well could have been the subject. The buckets could have been the subject. Same thing is true here. You have the sports car down front. And then, of course, you have the structure of the Miami Dolphins football stadium in the back as well. And either one could be sort of the subject. Going to some of these events, I have the opportunity to capture candid events, candid shots of people as well. And this is Scott Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's son, at an event. And sort of, again, what John said is I would prefer this kind of photo versus him posing and looking directly at me. And so that's something else you guys can consider is even when you're getting ready to take a picture of someone in an event and it's not candid, sometimes just having them look away from the camera can be as powerful as looking directly at the camera, depending on what you're looking for. Again, another Formula One photo. This was an interesting story. I got a chance to go on stage this was actually in Texas in October when they were doing the driver introductions. And so they were having the drivers come out from each team and interviewing them. And I got a chance to be on stage and take their photo. But every one of them afterwards would do something with the crowd. And this is Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champ. He was taking cell phones from members of the crowd and doing selfies and just sort of capturing that candid moment. And just the way the sun sort of came through the back of the stage and lit up his face, sort of made the moment in that regard. Here's Lewis, same driver. This is in the pits or in the garage. He's actually getting ready to get in his car. And while he's there, the team's building it. If you look at the front of this race car, the front of the body's not even on the car. And so while he's getting in, getting ready to be seatbelted, they're trying to put the car together in time to get it out on the track. And again, so this isn't necessarily kind of photo that is going to make Sports Illustrated or make it on, a news story. But sometimes it's sort of the players around the action, I think, that sometimes make the story as well. It's not necessarily always the person of interest. This is Max Verstappen sitting in his car waiting to be released. And sort of just, the eyes here being split by what they call the crown, which is this thing that goes over his head to protect him if there's a car accident. And then, again, another photo of just trying to, have the car, but it's more than that. You have the freeway, the Miami freeway behind them, sort of that Miami vibe. And so everybody who, at least if you're a Formula One fan who sees this photo, they're going to know exactly which track this was at, even if they don't know based on sort of the surrounding features of that car. Another example of that here, this is one from Texas. They had this giant Texas state flag in the background. And so I purposely found this spot on the track, sort of being aware of what was going to be in the background. And you guys can use that as well. I think one of the mistakes a lot of photographers make is when they're capturing a photo of someone or an object, they forget to see what's in the background. And so sometimes you can get a photo and all of a sudden there'll be like this thing coming out of their head and it's distracting. And you wonder, like, what is that? Well, it's, it's just because there was some odd thing behind it, but you can also use that to your advantage to try and tell the story as well. And so I was trying to use this flag to try and relay the story about where this was. And then this is a local distillery here. We were talking earlier about a brewery, I think down in Virginia. And so again, trying to place their product in a spot that makes sense to the locals here. Now, for people who are outside of Pittsburgh, this wouldn't mean anything to you. But this regional distillery is in southwestern Pittsburgh. We have a number of covered bridges in this area, which makes up sort of a important part of our history. And so trying to capture that bridge in the background, but highlight their product in a way that makes sense. The same can be true with the kind of work you guys do. Looking for that object that's relatable. Alice showed a number of photos that you could look at the photo instantly and she's in Africa somewhere, she's in India somewhere. You can sort of connect those dots. So I'll pause again here, and so I don't know if Joe, you want to go back to Alice or
well, I think
No,
actually, believe it or not, guys.
Question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Hamilton.
Yeah, I was
we've
going
got
to
some
say
questions.
one of the things that I've seen both Brooke and Alice show is that even if it's big events, that you're really tightening in on a specific subject or something. When we think about some of the projects that we do in our communities, like packing meals or roadside pickup or things like that, rather than trying to look at big pictures, is it best to try to find that sort of one person who's doing something unique or filling bags of food, an angle that you can get for just something like that, rather than trying to get that whole big picture and get everybody in there?
Well, Hamilton, I would say it still needs to be a combination, because you want to have that wide shot to have an establishing shot to set the scene, to show that there is this large group of people doing things together, but to humanize it, to have your viewer have more of a connection, you're going to want to focus in on a few people working together, passing a box to each other, or someone moving something down the conveyor belt and they're looking right into the camera. So it really does need to be a combination. I've done a lot of work out in Seattle with some Rotary clubs out there, Rotary First Harvest. That might not be their name anymore. I know that there was some legal issues, but anyhow, I would get detail shots of people, passing vegetables to, the recipients at the food banks and things like that. So, you really want to think about not just capturing things in a single way. It really, and especially if you're going to tell a story, you can use 3 to 5 images or something like that.
And building upon that, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Building upon that. So here's an example of what she's talking about. So this is the tunnel coming out of Heinz Field where the Steelers play, and the players always come out. So sort of, as she was saying, getting that wider shot to get the perspective about what's going on and where we are. Not the same game, but the same exact location. So this is Ryan Sazier, and sort of coming in close to sort of get that human effect that Alice was talking about. There's 2 examples here of sort of that effect.
Thank you for that. And we are actually getting close to time. We're going to push it a little bit, which is a little bit against, but you guys have been so kind to us. So real quick question.
And Alice, your
video
is off, Alice, in case, I didn't know if you knew that. I was telling you.
Yeah, I don't know how that
It's all good. It's all good. We've been looking at all the pretty pictures. By the way, let's give these 2 an absolute hand for sharing with us and telling us all these great stories. So we did have a couple of questions come in. So if we are going to use somebody's photograph, whether that's one of our own or a professional shooter, what's the right way to accolade them? And is it like what you said, just ask, or you should get some specific permission if I'm going to use a professional's shots? But how would you guys go about that? So we have a professional or we have somebody at the thing, we want to use their stuff. How do we go about that?
So you're talking about getting permission or crediting the photographer that's taken photos for your event. Is that what you're saying?
If we wanted to use somebody's work,
yes.
How would we go about doing that? Yeah.
It would be ideal if you gave them photo credit, and especially if they weren't aware of it. I mean, you have to make sure that there's no copyright issues. with using someone else's photo, unless you're pulling it from like some sort of royalty-free stock site. But it's photographers always appreciate credit. That's number one.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
what
for
I
that.
would what I would add is I think, reaching out to the photographer and asking for permission, I think, is first and foremost. And if they say
Absolutely.
yes, then giving them credit, usually labeling the photo as such is important. And I think 9 times out of 10, when a nonprofit or charity reached out to me, I almost always say yes. But I do get irritated, to be fair, when I find a photo that someone used without going through the courtesy of even contacting me. And I often get businesses saying, hey, I saw this photo. I'd like to use it for my calendar, my ex. And I'm always shocked at how often they want to use it for free. And I see that different. I do a lot of work in the nonprofit space, right? I see that different, a business trying to use a photo for free. And I'm always shocked at how almost belligerent they are about the fact that I won't let them use it for free. And I always have to tell them, like, well, I have equipment, time, expertise, knowledge, etc. Whatever product you're selling, you don't give it away for free. So, that's what I would say. Keep in mind, and you're going to get, I think, a good response, particularly based on your mission and what you're trying to do. And if you
Excellent.
don't mind, I saw Dan made a comment here
Good.
about, photo ideas for, where was it? I'm sorry, not Dan. Someone made a comment here, I guess it's Ken, about great ideas for Meals on Wheels and Adopt a Highway. This is probably more in Alice's bailiwick, but I would suggest sort of what Alice was talking about. Some of it's big, grand pictures of the project, but just as important, tight photos of the people that work impacts. Because that's really the story you want to tell your donors and your friends back home. Like, here's what we did, here's the road we built, or the Meals on Wheels, or whatever, and here's the kids that impacted, or here's the loved ones who took advantage of it. I think those are the kind of things that appeal to me as a photographer through images.
Anything to add on that, Alice?
Yeah, I think showing the people that the work is impacting, and the good that is bringing to their lives is really important. People really like and appreciate that, opposed to a group shot or someone standing with a check. But also, I think it is really important to tell the story that Rotarians are out there connecting with people and are in service. So when you can have that combination together of Rotarians serving their community, again, to me, it's often like some sort of a handoff or a passing of something to a beneficiary, or like some sort of care, like when it's in healthcare, it's a doctor with their hand on someone's shoulder or something like that. So just showing that human connection and appreciation between the two people, or maybe more than two people, but often two people in a photo.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, you two have been exceptionally gracious with your time and your talents and all that. So we cannot express our appreciation enough for you. I would like to summarize some of these wonderful points that you've made. So first, like, whatever your camera is the best camera, and keep shooting with it. Be kind and grateful to your subjects. So make sure that they know that you're shooting them and ask their permission, and don't change your dialect or your tone or your tempo because they're not from where you're from. I love that point. Avoid midday light shooting. Good technical point. Join your local camera club. Brooke, you've been encouraging me to do this for years. I'm going to take you up on that finally. Thank you. If you want to level up, ask somebody for help. They'll probably want to help you because they're enthusiastic about this anyway. Plan ahead, figure out, like, hey, what am I shooting? Is it the tight end? Is it the Meals on Wheels? Is it the roadside? What am I shooting and where do I need to be? And have a plan, but be flexible, because getting that candid shot might not be where you were setting up at. finding your mentors, we just found you two wonderful mentors here. So make sure you connect with them and their businesses and check out their portfolios. I know these two are wonderful helps. And as well, there is a absolute plethora of information on the internet now, right? The University of YouTube, as well as some of the other ones Alice had mentioned, are awesome sites. I've had some really good master classes, LinkedIn classes on this stuff. So no shortage of information out there if you want to look for it. Get on the floor, right? You might need to get on the floor to get that good shot. You might need to get dirty, because your job as the photographer is not to be comfortable, it's to get the shot. So I like that. And look for the light. And yeah, and just guys, those are my main takeaways. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it so much as civic leaders and Rotarians, and I hope that this is a catalyst for all of us to tell some better stories, because let's be honest, we all want to hear some of the good news. So thank you all for that. And if everybody could help me in giving a nice hand to these fine folks.
Thank you
all,
so much. I had so many more photos to share. That was a
that means we're gonna
whirlwind.
bring you back. We're gonna have round two.
Yeah, but anyhow, so
Yeah, I want to thank you as well, and thank Alice. She did a wonderful job. She made it easy for me because you had a real pro here. I just could fill in around the edges.
right back at you, Brooke. Thank you.
Well, we thank you guys for coming, and we thank all the attendees, whether you're here live or if you're watching this down the road. We all appreciate you, and thanks for your service in Rotary. Have a great night.